Hey guys, so I'm getting ready to tear into the carburetor on this old Toro push mower. Classic scenario, the engine will start and run a little rough on starting fluid, but it has a hard time starting on it by its own, so thought I'd help my buddy out and clean the carb and see if that does the trick, get this thing running good. So we'll get started tearing it in. First thing on this one, the little air filter housing just has one screw there. So we'll start tearing into it here. I'm using a 8mm socket on my impact here. Just make things go a little faster. Obviously you could use a regular ratchet. See how this air filter looks? Not bad. Relatively new, I've seen way worse. So it looks like there's a couple more little bolts there we'll have to pull out. Okay. Those aside. Okay, there's a little rubber hose down here where this connects to. It's kind of holding it in there. We'll clean that up a little bit before we put it back on. So next, if you look over here, you can see the full carburetor. This fuel line right here, we're going to clamp it off with some vice grips just so gas isn't dumping all over. There's this little green clip here. I'll use a pair of needle nose and get that off. And then we'll crack this little bolt, and then looks like there's another one here. And we might have to unhook some of this throttle housing up on the top here. So we'll mess with that up here. We'll see what else we can get into there. All right. Vice grips. 90% of the time, if you're having trouble with your small engine, whether it's a mower or some other yard tool, if you're having issues with it starting or staying running, 99% of the time it's going to be your carburetor like this, just needing cleaned. Not super difficult, definitely doable at home. So if you want to avoid this happening when it's off season, you know, you're done for mowing for the summer, try and drain all the gas out of the mower. If you can't do that, put a little stable or sea foam or something like that in the gas tank, run it for a little bit. That will help stabilize the gas and keep it from gumming up, because ethanol that we have in all our gas nowadays is nasty stuff that attracts water over time, and that's what gums up these carbs and makes them not work right. So you can do that, or if you're like me and you're really trying to avoid doing this all the time on all your equipment every year, you can use non-ethanol gas. It's a little more expensive, but it kind of avoids the whole problem at the source. Just trying to see if I can yank this off. It is super tight on there. It's probably never come off before. There we go. And we're spilling a little gas. That never hurt no one, right? Let me tighten this up a little bit more so stop doing that. Okay. Now that we made a mess, we can officially keep things going. Alright, so bring you over here. You can see I finally got that hose off. It was on there really stiff. I just ended up yanking on the whole hose, trying not to tear anything with a screwdriver or anything like that. So next we're going to pop these bolts off in there. And we'll see what else we got to tear off to get into it. So we're going to need a little bit bigger one. We might have to use old school on that one. That's way back in there. Actually, might not have to touch that bottom one at all. So, okay, so this is actually easier than I thought. So, if you look right on top of the carb here, there's just a little hook holding in that throttle linkage. We'll just take that off and the whole carb will be free. Now we can do what we need to do. There we go. Pretty nasty. So we will crack into this guy, see what we can get into. Alright, so we got the carb off on the table here. Pretty nasty on the outside. But we're going to spray it off real quick with some regular carb cleaner. Okay. On the bottom here, got a 13mm little bolt for the bowl. Crack that. I need a little more. And we're gonna have a little mess of gas. Make sure you're not lighting up a cancer stick or anything like that while you're doing this. You're gonna be in a ball of fire if you do. So, okay, really not too bad. I've seen tons of gunk caught up in one of these. Thing is, it really just does not take a lot to clog one of these up. There's really small passageways. If you look up in here, these little holes down in here, that's where gas has to kind of vaporize and get shot through. So it really does not take a lot of crud to keep these from working right. So what we're going to do, spray as much as we can up into all the little crevices you see. It's not necessarily important for you to know what every single part on here is. You can just literally find every little hole, like there's little holes down in here, and spray carb cleaner all the way up through everything you can find. Go through a whole can if you have to. This stuff's not expensive. And we'll go ahead and do that. You can actually, so I'll probably actually take this off just so it's not in our way. This is a little needle or a hinge that holds this bowl, this plastic thing, the float. We'll yank that out. Make sure you're not losing all these little parts. Obviously they're pretty tiny. And this design is pretty universal. Every carburetor you're going to mess with is going to have something like this. This is called the needle. This one does not have a rubber tip. Unlike motorcycles and a little bit larger engines, they'll have a rubber tip that has to seal, and sometimes they get dirty. You got to make sure those are clean. This one's just all metal, so not a big deal there. So we get a little bit more room to kind of spray through everything. And you can look, I don't know if you can see down in there, right here in this hole, there's a little brass opening in there. We'll definitely want to spray out, so get in there. That's why you want to use the little plastic straw on these. It's also a good way because you can see right there how it's spraying out the sides. That's how you know it's cleared up enough. Oh. Probably a good idea to wear safety glasses while you're doing this, so you don't get carb cleaner in your eyes. As for me, I'm going to be using the safety squints. So get that outside clean up the rest of the way. Right through here, this is the throttle linkage that we unhooked. And when you start the engine, this is going to flip and kind of fluctuate on its own. On a mower, obviously there's not like a throttle that you're controlling directly, so it's kind of automatic with springs and stuff. And this kind of regulates the air fuel mixture. I've seen it before where these are pretty seized up and nasty, so obviously that would cause issues. This one, really not bad, like I said. Okay. We'll get these over here. Okay. Definitely not like perfect clean, but most of the time, honestly, you do not need to spend hours on one of these. This will be pretty good. I do have an ultrasonic cleaner. So what that is a little, basically a little chemical bath with detergent that you can put these in, and it will sit and buzz. Basically very small vibrations that will help clean these carbs super well. I am going to throw this one in there. You do not need to have one of those. They are not too expensive. They're about $60. Amazon, you can get a small cheap one. I've done a short video on them before. If you have a lot of machines and you do like, you know, working on them yourself, it is probably worth the investment. But you do not need one to do a job like this. You can be totally fine with this carb cleaner and throw one of these back together and get it back on there. So I'm going to throw this one in the ultrasonic just to be super clean, just because I do have it. But and then we'll move on. All right, you guys, just pulled this out of the ultrasonic for just like 5 minutes, and you can see how spick and span this thing gets in there. Like I said, absolutely not necessary for you to have to do a job on one of these. So let's throw this back together real quick. I did take this bowl off, but you do not have to do that. I just did because I was throwing it in the cleaner. You don't want to put plastics and stuff like that in the cleaner unless it's completely unavoidable. So slide this back in there. Gotta get it lined up perfectly. We'll try on this side. There we go. Make sure that's doing its job. Yep. Okay. Super easy. We're just going to throw the bowl back on here. You want to look and make sure you're getting it seated as evenly as possible on this lip, because if it's not, you will have a gas leak out of there. You'll know pretty quick. There's a gasket in there that has to kind of be evenly put on, so throw this screw back in there. Before I crank it down, I'm going to look around it real quick, make sure no side is sticking up more than the other. Set it down like that. No need to crank this super tight, obviously, just snug. You do kind of have to, like, I'm using my fingers right now to kind of keep this in line from slipping off onto one way or the other. That way it's relatively even, so that looks pretty good. And now we'll throw it back on the mower. Alright, so we're ready to put the car back on the mower. We got it all cleaned up. First step, reverse of exactly how we took it off. We're going to get this top black throttle linkage connected to this little hook right here on the top. There's a little hole you can see right there. Just got to loop through. You do have to kind of twist it awkwardly like this, sideways, and feed it up through there. Something to keep in mind when you're looking at these, a lot of them will have a gasket that you'll have to replace. This one, I'm sure it wouldn't hurt to have a gasket, but it does have a rubber O-ring on the little inlet that this is fitting up to. So it's really not a problem. Don't be surprised if you take this off and it's completely disintegrated. Totally normal. And not the end of the world if you don't have a new one to put back on it. It will be fine. But you can also take a piece of a box, something not like thick cardboard, but like really thin paper board. Trace it out and cut something out like that if you really, really, really want to have something in there. But most of the time it's really not necessary. Start this one. We'll be smart. We'll start it with our hand first. Then we'll throw it back in. These are 10 millimeters. I don't know if I already said that, but just give it a couple thumps there. All right. So next up, I'm going to put this hose back on right here. Slide the clip over. That was really stiff before, so I'm going to have to probably force that on there. And then this last hose is what connects to our airbox assembly that we pulled off. So shove this guy back on. Okay, went on super easy actually. Get rid of this. I ended up using pliers like this for this clip. It's just a little wider mouth to get that, because the needle nose are a little tough to get in there. And that's it for that. Next up is putting this back on, and that vacuum hose I just pointed to presses right onto this. I'm going to spray this off real quick, just so it's not so filthy. Let me put it back on there. Not necessary, but might as well do it while it's off. Just get most of that filth off of there. Press this back on. This one's really easy. Okay. Then we'll put the smaller little 6mm screws back in. You can see on this one, 3 holes. 1, 2, 3. Just gonna pop those back on. You can see how this is really, once you break it down to just its pieces and you're not throwing screws all around the place like I just did, really not too difficult to do. And you can totally get your mower back in operation doing this, so definitely doable. See, there we go. There's that screw. Get these started by hand. The impact, this is just an impact driver. It's not an impact wrench. There is a difference. You do not want to be cranking down on something small like this with a full-on impact wrench. Like I said, easily you can just do this with a ratchet. This gets a little faster and I have it, so might as well. And then we'll throw our air filter housing back on there. This has little grooves down here, and there's little holes here that fit in. It just hinges on those. We'll slide it in. And this little screw just tightens up. And that's all back together. Now, the moment of truth. We'll get this on the floor and see if we can get it started up. All right, let's give it a pull, see if we can get it going. This one has a primer bulb, so we'll give it a couple hits. See if we got it. There we go. First crank. That was pretty easy. And that's all, man. That's pretty easy. So, success on this one. Remember, you can always do this sort of stuff. So, pretty easy job. This is pretty applicable for most mowers. It's going to always look a little bit different. You're going to have different trim, plastic on this. But, yep, that's all. So, thank you guys for watching. Check out my other videos if you want. But, yeah.